Hello and welcome to Non-Toxic Environments. This is your host, Andy Pace. Today is a very exciting topic for me because it's a topic that I'm very passionate about myself. Matter of fact, it's about an organization that I'm actually involved with, and I would love to tell you about it. Change the Air Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization founded by a group of passionate air quality professionals and advocates aiming to give every person the knowledge, resources, and support to achieve better health by breathing safe indoor air. The foundation addresses this hidden epidemic of poor indoor air quality through three main initiatives: education, policy reform, and research. We believe safe indoor air is a basic human right. Now, to discuss this further with us today, we have Kendra Seymour, who is the co-founder and executive director of Change the Air Foundation. Kendra is a mother of two, and she discovered hidden mold and water damage in her home were actually harming her family's health. After years of research into mold and indoor toxins and a lot of hard lessons learned, she became dedicated to helping others by building awareness in online communities and collaborating with fellow advocates to educate the public around the importance of indoor air quality. She is a passionate advocate for improving health by improving indoor air quality. She oversees the foundation initiatives with a special focus on raising awareness, outreach, and fundraising. Please welcome Kendra.
Thanks, Andy, so much for being here. And obviously, we are so excited that you've joined the board in the last 2 months and the perspective you bring, because this is such a big issue. And my story, and even we talked a little about your story before. This is happening every day to people, and if they had better information and better resources, we could prevent a lot of these health challenges and the financial burden that comes with it from even happening in the first place. So I'm excited to be here.
Fantastic. Well, let's dive right into it. So your personal journey into this started, 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah. I think it's funny because I think anyone who's been sick, you kind of have that big turning point, but then you look back and there were like signs even earlier.
Right.
But I kind of start our story, and I'll give you all the abridged version because I think there's a couple points people will really relate to. Is my husband and I, we were in our late 20s, and we were, getting ready to buy our first house. And I think this was like 2011. And we're in Northern Virginia, which is a very, busy and expensive area. And we weren't even sure home ownership was, something we could afford. It was just so expensive. So when this house came on the market, it looked beautiful. We couldn't believe it was in our budget. And the first red flag, I didn't realize it at the time, was it was a flip. Now, I remembered, house flipping shows are all the rage. It's a great way to make a buck. But the house was a flip. And there was multiple bids on the house, and we got it. And I was so grateful. And we thought we did everything right. We hired the home inspector, and he found some signs of moisture in the basement. And so we countered and said, all right, you guys need to fix this. And I remember, because we lived nearby, our realtor called and said, hey, swing by after work, you and your husband. They've opened up the basement wall and they want to show you. So I get there, and I'm standing in the basement with my husband and our realtor. Their realtor is there. And whoever handyman they hired to open up this wall is there. And it's a giant wall of mold. We now know that it was Stachybotrys. And I remember at the time thinking, if this wasn't safe, we wouldn't be standing here, because these are professionals. They do this all the time.
Right.
And I kind of was saying something to my realtor about being nervous, and their realtor overheard me. And she says, listen, I have 2 other offers in this folder who would love to see yours fall through. So if you don't want the house, just say so. And of course, we had thought oh, this is a house we're going to have our future children in. I didn't want that to happen. I'm like, it must not be a big deal. And we trusted them. But so we moved into the house, and there were other signs, I won't even get, we turned on the dryer the first night and all the lights in the house would blink. There were just signs left and right, electrical and windows and stuff. But we thought it's home ownership, and fast forward, and I am probably 8.5 months pregnant, and I'm on bed rest at this point.
Mm.
She wasn't growing my firstborn and correctly. And I go to the bathroom and I on our main floor and I see a stain in the ceiling. And I thought that's not right, but I'm pregnant and I'm on bed rest. And so I call a contractor who we had used before, who is, a really nice guy. And I said, I need you to come look at this. I'm pregnant. I know this can't be good. So he gets there and he was able to take a pencil and push it through the drywall.
Oh
Now,
boy.
we didn't see any visible mold, but that's how wet the drywall was. And again, this like just a teeny tiny discoloration, a small spot. Like if I hadn't, like no one else would notice it. I noticed it as a homeowner. And long story short, it was the bathroom, and he ripped out the bathroom without any containment, without anything, because the government said that if it's less than 10 square feet, you can rip it out yourself.
Mm.
And I thought, he's the professional. That's what the government website says, must be fine. And that bathroom, we now know, had Chetomium and Stachybotrys, among other things, growing. And my daughter is born, and later my son. So it was over a 3-year period. And every health issue, she was, if you've heard of a colic baby who screams like, 4 to 6 hours a day, she was still screaming 8 hours a day at 11 months old.
Mm.
That's not normal. And had failure to thrive and hypermobility and just all these issues. And they just, well, she's a fussy baby. That's just how some kids are. Later, my son is born, he has really bad eczema and severe food allergies and things like that. And, it just, that happens to some kids. And the turning point kind of came where I was in our kitchen and the other bathroom, the only bathroom at this point we hadn't had to rip out. And there was a tiny stain in the ceiling, about a quarter. And I was like, that wasn't there last week. I said, I have children now, though. I'm not even thinking about my health. I'm like, kids are different. So I was like, I better call a plumber. So I called the plumber and she's like, yeah, no worries. I said, if he opens it up and there's mold, like, what do we do? And she's like, oh, the plumber's used to working around mold. Don't worry about it. Don't worry. We'll take care of the leak. And then if you need to call our remediation company, he can come in. And I was like, God, that doesn't sound, it's not sitting right. So I thank my lucky stars. I don't know who gave me the recommendation. It was probably a mom in some online group. I call our remediation company and they turned out to be wonderful. And the woman who answered the phone, her name was Lois. I call her my angel. And she said to me, listen, honey, I am not your first call. Your first call is to an IEP. And I said, what's an IEP? And that started our journey into understanding that not only is mold removal in the state of Virginia or the federal, it's not regulated. And there isn't the understanding that there needs to be among professionals about how to safely address and remove this. And I'll wrap it up by saying my daughter's health, it still took us, believe it or not, probably 2 more months before we connected the dots. And that's because it kind of was coming to a head with urinary frequency and all these other things. They actually thought she had a brain tumor. Luckily, that wasn't the case. But when they ran out of answers with the doctor, their conclusion was that it was all in her head, and she was 4. So that started my journey to healing our bodies and our home, and kind of led me here. Sorry, that was probably more than you wanted, but
No, that was disturbing and amazing at the same time. And I mean that because I hear this so often with my clients, full-grown adults, not 4-year-olds, full-grown adults who are told by their physicians that, they should probably go see a therapist because of what they think is going on. But children don't, aren't doing this. I mean, they're just reacting to what's around them naturally.
Yeah.
And
we care more when it's the kids too. I'm sure you see like, oh, you're getting older. You're a tired mom. Like, welcome to your 30s and 40s. Like, you make excuses, but kids should be healthy, generally speaking.
So, boy, lots to unpack there. First thing I'm going to say is during the home inspection, because I've heard this from a lot of people. And obviously your experience is not only the home inspector, but also the realtor pressuring you to essentially buy the home. Um, have you seen any improvement in the industry? Because I haven't, essentially, since this point where the inspectors, the realtors are saying, "Oh, just that's fine, don't worry about it," or and again, we'll probably talk about the foundation pretty soon, but I mean, this is just remarkable to me that professionals in the industry can essentially just whitewash this event like it's no big deal. People move in the home, get just incredibly sick, and they can say, "Oh, well, it's, another day at the office."
Yeah, no, it's super important. I mean, that's why we do what we do, right? Because this is such a multifaceted problem, right? You have real estate, you have construction, you have the way we're building homes, you have the way we're designing homes. I have not personally seen a massive shift. What I have seen is in like online groups, you have a number of people, whether it's Pans and Pandas moms, or mold related health groups, or Lyme, or autism, and people are coming together and they're starting to it's almost like a movement, right? And they're leaning on each other for answers and information. And out of that, I have seen some holistic realtors. I think the kind of general term to describe themselves, people who are in some of these key industries that have gotten sick themselves and are like, hey, there is a fundamental problem here with how we're addressing this in our industry. And I will say, like, Andy, for a long time, I was angry a little bit. Like, I trusted these people. You are the professional. You were supposed to know better. And from that, I realized, I think it wasn't, I know there's like some people who are probably being nefarious and shady on purpose. I think generally speaking, most people just don't know. They don't know how big of an issue it is. They don't know how great of an impact that mold and water damage can have. Because think about it. Oh, every home's going to have mold or water. It smells like grandma's basement. It's part of life. It's just an allergy. And so it's dismissed, I think, more often because people just don't know better. And so I think if we can begin to raise awareness in some of those key industries, and then as homeowners and renters. And so this starts, I'll say this and then we can move on, is you as a homeowner and renter have to be your own advocate, because no one will care about your health or your home as much as you. And that's a lot to take on if you're already not feeling well or taking care of a sick spouse or a child, but you have to be the one with every professional, whether it's your HVAC person, your remediator, whoever it is, you have to be asking these questions.
100%. When you said that, don't worry, the plumbers used to working around mold, or the professionals who tearing down the wall saying, "Oh, this is all mold. Don't worry about it. You can walk in there without a mask on, without protection." Um, you know, I hear this all the time from. I do a lot of work with like painting contractors and flooring contractors, and they will say, "Oh, listen, I've been using these products for 20 years. I'm fine." And so I mean, well, you're fine because you're talking to me right now. I understand that, but there's so many contractors that I used to work with that either are no longer in the business because they got sick, or they're dead because they died of cancer. And I've seen this. I've been in the industry for 30 plus years. And so that's not an indication of, just because you're doing something and just because you get paid to do that something does not mean you're an expert. It means that somebody's willing to pay you. That's it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you must, and what you deal with, right? Building materials and things like that. Like, people assume that there are laws in place on all of this protecting us. And we tend to, as a country, be more reactive. We wait for it to be a problem and make a lot of people sick
Mhm.
before we even like, oh, maybe that isn't healthy. Like, and we tend to do that a lot more in the US than other countries. And yeah, just because you've been doing something for 10 or 20 or 30 years doesn't mean you're doing it right. And I'll give people listening a trick. And I find this sometimes when I was always taught, like, you respect the professional, whether it's like the plumber or the doctor, like they're the expert. And questioning them somehow, or asking questions, was not respectful. And I would encourage people to ask questions, push back a little bit, be kind. But if they answer with how many years they've been in the industry instead of answering your question,
Mhm.
that's a red flag, because they're
Yes.
deflecting.
Yeah, 100% for sure. Oh my gosh. And then of course we have this whole situation where with homes being renovated before they sell or flipped, the situation you found in your bathroom with pushing the pencil up through that little spot. That little spot was probably a huge spot a few months
Yeah.
before you bought the house, but they covered it up with kills and a fresh coat of paint to
Fresh
sell
coat.
it.
Yep.
Oh, boy, that is so frustrating, but it happens every single day.
Well, and I know maybe you don't want to go here. I don't want to throw home inspectors under the bus, but they get what, maybe a few hours of training
Mhm.
in mold and water damage at
Yeah.
best. And so I
Mhm.
always tell people like, you may want to bring in someone in addition to your home inspector if you're doing that. And here's the thing too, and I've realized your home inspector, right? They have good relationships with realtors. They want to be referred to the whole client roster of their realtor, so they have an interest in seeing this deal go through too. They don't want to be seen as the stick in the mud that points out all the problems in the
Mhm.
home, and then the buyers keep backing out because this inspector is almost too good. And I'm not saying that because I don't want a bunch of angry letters from inspectors, but um just understand who you're hiring, and if you have concerns related to specific areas, bring in a professional in that area who can advocate on your behalf. um I'll
Yeah, I
just leave
always talk about follow the money.
that.
What is the reasoning behind what they're doing, and if it's because they want to then do more inspections for that realtor, that makes a ton of sense. It's like you want to go to the financial institution that's giving you the best appraisals, and so if you're a builder or a realtor, or you're helping folks out, you're not going to go to those financial institutions that don't appraise things out well. They don't find the right comparables to look at. And so, yeah, we all in the industry, I can see they want to help each other out, right? But on the other hand, it's to what end? And that end is people are getting sick because these homes should not be sold in this condition. From my perspective, these homes should not be built this way to begin
Yeah,
with. That's a whole separate discussion for another day.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
before we get into the foundation, I want to talk a little bit about um, how your kids were essentially diagnosed, because I know we'll have a ton of questions coming up with that, after this goes to podcast, and I just I want to hear how that went.
Yeah, so we have like a laundry list of like labels that we racked up, and like, both kids different symptoms. And I'm not saying that mold is 100% responsible for all of their issues, right? I understand there's genetics and family history and other things, but it's certainly exacerbated, if not caused, some of these. And once we like got to the root cause and like addressed the mold and water damage correctly in the home and treated the home like kind of holistically in terms of the whole environment, not just the actual areas of growth, but where that cross contamination may have occurred, they got significantly better, and the eczema went away and things like that. And but my oldest, she had strep throat for the first time around this time, and that ended up with the diagnosis of pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorder associated with streptococcal infection, PANDAS for short,
Mhm.
or PANS. And so we ended up seeing a neurologist for that condition, who is your typical like allopathic doctor. And she had mentioned things like, oh, sometimes we see Lyme with these kids. And so she sent us to a specialist. That was our first kind of foray into like integrative and functional medicine. And that's when we started to kind of like peel the onion back. And I started asking questions about mold and things like that. And so we ultimately, at one point, we were with the shoemaker doctor. We were very lucky at the time because, again, this was 7 or 8 years ago. I think there was only a handful. You can count on both hands the number of shoemaker doctors in the country, and one was 45 minutes from us. So we lucked out there. But then ultimately got connected with a practitioner who was a great fit for us. But it was hard because it ultimately was a functional integrative type doctor who has been able to kind of bring them the rest of their way in their healing. And so that we feel grateful because it was out of pocket and it was tough on us, but we were able to make it work. And I know that that isn't an option for a lot of people. Um, and I'd like to see, and through the foundation, and we can get to that later, more acceptance of how our environment can impact, our health. And, hopefully increase the number of doctors who are asking the right questions around, if you're going in for your third treatment for, a sinus infection with antibiotics and it's not getting better. Well, the Mayo Clinic has research that's, well over a decade old, and it talks about how I think it's 93% of fungal infections or of sinus infections are fungal related. And so if the antibiotic isn't working, let's not prescribe a fourth antibiotic. Let's ask a different question. And so, that's a long-winded way of saying
No,
we're
I
good
appreciate
now.
that.
We're good. We're good. The kids are doing well, but we're very mindful of the air in our home. And even our home today, like I have an area that I know we're going to have to open up. We think we have a small leak, and but the difference between now and then is I'm a lot wiser, and I know how to tackle these things the right way. I catch them sooner. And how I find the right people to do it. And that makes all the difference, because it can feel very overwhelming, like, oh God, how do I even find these people? And
Sure.
I hear you, because it can be hard, but it's possible.
For sure. And that is a thing that so many people who I talk with every day talk about. There's just not enough time in the day to research this stuff. Or when I go online to start doing research, it's just I'm going in this circle of just being passed off from one company to another who are just trying to sell me on why
Right.
their version is better.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about this in a bit too, about how, I mean, just the mold remediation industry is just, I mean, again, follow the money. It's a huge money maker for the contractors, but I can't tell you how often people call me and said, we had our home remediated 2 years ago. It's back again.
Yeah.
Because, what why do they care if they have future work? I mean, for them, it's great. There's no guarantee that they could just say, well, it's natural. We can't do anything about it. So, all right, I don't want to go too off on that tangent, but all right. So when did the whole idea of, we now that we know so much about this, maybe we should start helping others and turn it into a nonprofit? When did that start?
Yeah, so we have been I would say it's probably been like 5 or 6 years where we've been in a place where I have just felt like this pull to like help people. And it started with like online communities, and I had a Facebook group that grew, and I randomly connected with Brandon Chapo, who's one of our co-founders. I'd never met him before, but very brief story. Like, he was an air traffic controller in his 30s, the prime of his youth and health. He had to have like an airman's medical license. So like, this is a guy who is healthy and had moved into a building that had made him sick. And he's like, there's got to be laws in place to protect people. And he realized there weren't. And so he worked in Ohio to get a bill proposed. And during that time, there had been a news story written about him, and it had gotten on my radar because all I do, even to this day, my kids are like, you need a hobby, mom, is I think about mold and water damage and indoor air quality 24/7. And I'm like a dog with a bone the last 7 or 8 years. And Brandon joined my group, and he posted something about the Ohio bill. And I said, wait, you're not the air traffic controller. And he's like, I am. And we ended up connecting. And I never do that. I don't like connect with strangers online like that. But for whatever reason, we ended up chatting. And he's like, I want you to meet Michael Rubino. Michael Rubino has, very longstanding mold remediation business and indoor air quality, and geared towards a sensitized client. And he's like, you got to meet Michael Rubino, because I just connected with him and he has this idea. And so when I went to the meeting, I assumed like they already had a nonprofit, and like this, it was very early stages, which was amazing, because we spent 9 months before we launched really talking about what we wanted this to be, the changes that needed to happen, not just in the day-to-day practices that homeowners and renters do, but on a large scale. So policy reform at the state and federal level. building practices and things like that, and thus began Change the Air Foundation. And um, I never in a million years thought I'd be standing here today talking to you about this, but I am so proud of what we have been able to do and connect with people like you, because every time I talk with someone, either they have a story or they know someone who has a story related to this, and it just shows how big of a problem this is. And it's not being talked about enough.
Oh my gosh, not enough at all. And for everybody who knows me, I mean, I'm a research fiend. When it comes to building materials and chemicals and products and whatnot, I mean, people will call me about just unbelievably random things, and I'll probably have something on it for
Yeah.
them, like right at my fingertips. So you are like my mold doppelganger. You're the same way
Thank you.
with anything mold related.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, Kendra, she's got
Yeah.
this. And so, I mean, this is why I appreciate it. And I appreciate everybody on the board too. Everybody has such a diverse background, and they bring something really, really good to the group so that, we can come together and discuss these very important issues. And everybody has a little bit different approach, which is good, because then we can make sure that then when people do read it, see it, and they want to get involved, they can see something on those documents that relates to them.
Yeah. Well, and we're so happy you're here because obviously, like, not to sound like a Marvel character, my origin story is, largely mold and water damage. So is Brandon's, and so is Mike Rubino's. So the fact that you're bringing such a critical piece with our building materials, like we were so excited. It just makes so much sense because, we spend 90% of our time indoors, and our indoor air, I think the EPA estimates, is 2 to 5 times more polluted than our outdoor air, and as much as 100 times more polluted. And it's mold and water damage bacteria, but it's VOCs from our building materials. It's low level carbon monoxide exposure that we're not aware of. I mean, there's so many things in our air, and we're not thinking about it because the air looks clean, right? They
Mhm.
even smell clean, and it's just such a big problem. We're indoors more than ever, and we're missing this piece to our health.
Sure. Well, and COVID just made things worse because we're forced to spend more time indoors than we used to. And then I also say, and this shows my age in this industry, back in the mid 90s with the Clean Air Act that came out, basically started regulating VOCs, or volatile organic compounds. And so manufacturers started taking VOCs out of the products to meet the governmental regulations, but they just add back in a whole host of other toxins that aren't regulated. So for the last 30 years, we've been building homes with what we thought were healthier building materials, but they were considered eco-friendly, not human-friendly. And then we're building homes that are much, much tighter for energy efficiency because,
Right.
of the global climate change issues. And so it's the unintended consequence of trying to do the right thing, right? And so now we're in this situation after these 30 years, and actually I could argue it dates back to the early 70s, that we are in these toxic boxes that don't breathe.
Mhm.
And not only is it a chemical issue from what I see, but it's becoming an absolutely enormous moisture issue because moisture gets locked in the cavities of these walls and it can't get out, and it just becomes a nice, comfortable breeding ground for mold.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you must find it so frustrating. I know as a consumer, and I still very much relate and identify as a consumer. Like I have taken like IEP and remediation certifications, but I'm a consumer first and foremost. And like if I go to the store and I'm like, oh, low VOC. Well, that sounds better. Well, what does that mean? I don't know. Or I see like you got this special seal. Well, that must mean something good. I'm going to pick that product.
Yeah.
But it's overwhelming as a consumer, to navigate the building material side, let alone, the remediation side. And something, you kind of touched on this before. I would say remediation is like the Wild West.
Mhm.
And, you call 5 different companies and you're going to get 5 different solutions for your problem. And so when somebody says, I have this magic spray or fog and you don't need to open up your walls, like who doesn't want to believe that that's the answer? Because that's a lot less intrusive on my life. Unfortunately, it often doesn't get to the root cause of the problem, the moisture behind it. It doesn't remove the source. And so I see how easy it is to fall for some of these marketing and the things we want to be true, versus what the reality is
But
more.
but you hit it right in the head. It's the marketing, and it's the fact that, for the last how many years now, dozens of or decades, people thought they could take a little pill to lose weight, or they could do one
Yeah,
exercise, or buy a whatever piece of equipment, and all of a sudden they're going to lose 30 pounds. People love to take the shortcut route to everything. It's
yeah,
not I'm not saying that people are should be blamed for that. It's not their fault. It's the fact that we all want an easier solution because we're all busy and we
yeah,
all have lives, and so it's like, if I can find an easier way to do something, I'm probably going to go for it if it sounds legitimate. But then
yeah, right.
go back to what I said earlier, which is follow the money. Why are they actually, who's promoting this method? Why are they promoting it? And if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is, right?
Absolutely.
And yeah,
Yeah,
and so with the, I mean, there's 92,000 chemicals used in the production of building materials and home goods. And we're going to say that if manufacturers eliminate a few hundred of them in the VOCs, then all of a sudden the products will be magically safe. I think once we actually look at this objectively, we'll think, well, okay, obviously that's not correct. But yet you go into a hardware store and it says eco-friendly and air safe and green. You want to believe that because you don't want to have to actually do the research. It's easier to sort of take that head in the sand mentality and say, all right, well, I've done my best, move on. And
yeah,
then something happens. And then you end up, blaming yourself for it,
yeah.
which,
Oh, yeah.
folks, I mean, we all are doing this. We're all trying to make these easier choices. But, when it comes to your family's health, and this is where it comes into why people actually start going down this path of research and changing their lifestyles, because it's personally affected them one way or another. And before, it's like in the building industry, why don't builders build healthy homes? Because they don't have to,
Yeah,
because they're not sick. They don't have these issues themselves, or they'll say, yeah, everybody gets a cold or the flu when they move into a new home. That's just the way it is. It's the stress. No,
yeah.
it's not. I can go into detail about that, but the fact is that there are better ways to do it, but you usually don't do those better ways unless you absolutely have to.
Yeah, I mean, it's more time, it's more money, it's more training, and we built the house, and I mean, I forget how many, tens of thousands of parts make up a home, and
Hmm.
how many tradespeople, and then independent contractors, and you're counting on them to all do their job well.
Hmm.
And people think like something as simple as like window flashing that happens before your windows are installed. They think, oh, you assume that most of the time people are doing a good job. And I would argue with the number of times we've seen even just the installation of a window, the thing that that company does day in and day out, the actual worker who's doing it wrong,
Hmm.
it's far more commonplace than it should. And so I'm not saying don't trust the professionals you hire. I'm saying, verify and research and follow up, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Every single person, I'm sure if I've ever hired you to come into my home, like I ask a lot of questions, and I am probably that person who they're like, oh, you are a higher needs client. And it's because of what we've been through and we've been burned. And I always say, listen, it's not that I don't trust you. It's just, my goal is to protect my home and my health and my family. And
Hmm.
so it needs to make sense. And I have before, and this is something I'll give, if they need permission to do it, I have stopped professionals in the middle of a job
Hmm.
doing something. And not even just mold related, but other things, and say, you know what, I'm not comfortable going forward. We're going to stop and we'll circle back. But I need to look into this. It A doesn't sound right, or B, or because I think sometimes people let let's stick with remediation, for example, the bad remediation happen, even though there was like all these red flags along the way, even when the workers showing up and they're putting up containment, but like the containment's falling down and they're starting work. Like, no, no, no. You stop them because it's so much, it can be so much more difficult after the fact to correct an issue that was done poorly than to kind of head it off at the beginning.
Yeah, and I see this, and I don't want to go on too much of a tangent on this one because, but I no, 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 I just found this yesterday with a client. She had a whole house of carpeting installed, and there's a problem with the padding, but yet the carpet installer just finished the entire house. And when the customer said, "Well, what's wrong with this padding? It's thicker here and thinner there," they said, "Oh yeah, the padding wasn't even all the way across." So why did you do the entire house? Why did you completely finish the home? And because they'd rather just blame the product and pass the buck to somebody else than actually stop, make a phone call, get it corrected, and finish the project correctly. It's so frustrating.
Yeah. Or hope you don't notice as a homeowner.
Right, that too. So change the air foundation. You and Brandon and Michael started this. It's been about year and
Two
a half,
years.
2 years.
Yeah, 2 years in June. Yeah, we're super
Yeah,
excited.
wonderful.
Our anniversary.
So give us the synopsis. What is the mission and the goal of the foundation?
Yeah, so I'll simplify it. I'm not going to read you our mission, right? The eyes will glaze over, but we really help people make that connection between their health and their home, specifically around indoor air quality issues. So things from mold and water damage, VOCs, and other things like that. And we are here for you, for the homeowner, for the renter. And we have 3 initiatives. So we do things around education, policy reform, and research. And one of the things when I was going through this was I really wish I had had a reliable, up-to-date, and free resource where I could fact check and verify and be pointed in the right direction. Sometimes you call professionals and it's not their fault. Like they're trying to sell a service, but how do I know that what they're selling is right for me or accurate? And so we have a number of resources and so much more coming down the pipeline, interviews and articles and podcasts. We're going to be having, it's like 11 free downloads that are coming that you can take. And it's, everything from how to find a good IEP to inspect and investigate your home, how to find a good remediation company. What does good remediation look like? What about your HVAC system? How do I navigate that? Or, what am I looking for? I don't even know where to start, so we have mini classes. Again, everything is free that kind of dive into some of these topics, testing in a little bit more detail. We're going to have a remediation 101 series. We have a doctor outreach program that we're launching this year that I'm super excited about to help doctors, identify and diagnose people affected by indoor air quality faster. There's no reason when I, went to my children's, pediatric appointments, they give you a form, anyone who's had kids in the last 10 years, and it's like, do you live in a house, built before 1978? And if you check yes, well, then they have a conversation with you about lead. Now, I should say we should be having the conversation about lead with everyone, but that's another topic. But that we're asking some of these questions. So lots of resources coming for people so that they can navigate this and make fewer mistakes than I did and what others have done. We also do policy reform. We have been so blessed with Brandon Chapo, the air traffic controller I mentioned, co-founder. He really works to lobby at the state and federal level with passionate volunteers. So people like you and me, Andy, and I'm sure many of these callers have reached out, and we have gotten 8 state bills proposed, which is amazing because I don't think people realize there are only 5 states in the US that even have any kind of certification or licensure requirements. It's the wild, wild west everywhere else for who you hire to remove mold and water damage from your home. My hairdresser in the state of Virginia, we have nothing. And my hairdresser has to go through more training and more certification requirements than the person removing the mold from my home. That's a problem. And so he's working to do some amazing work at the state and federal level to implement licensing and certification requirements, indoor air awareness programs, firmer disclosures. And so he and the people who are volunteering are doing really good work there so that, we can only help so many people day to day, and that's so important, right? Right now, I need to find a good remediator. Come to changetheairfoundation.org. We have resources for you. But this is a systemic problem. What about the runners? And you're talking about these big, companies that you are one of, 1,000 runners. They don't care if you get sick. Oh, so you move out. Guess what? They're going to paint over and they're going to bring someone else in, and some poor family is going to be next.
Mhm.
And so, how do we change that? How do we protect people? How do we protect the workers? And then research. So we do fund small scale research and really work to make it accessible to the average person, because I don't know about anyone else. Like when I was going through everything, I did not have time to look for the research, read the research, understand what it meant in layman's terms. So we simplify a lot of that on our website for people who want some of that, if you need that for a doctor or a spouse who's reluctant, like, oh, mold can't make you sick. We have resources on our research tab that can point you in that direction. Sorry, that was a lot.
No, that's great. Honestly, and it, even though I'm on the board, I love hearing, all the things that the organization is doing. It's everything that you're doing is going to positively affect people down the road, or currently, of course. There was just a victory just this past week with Brandon. I know he got another House bill approved.
Yeah, so that can I jump in? So
Yeah,
actually, we had in Illinois and Iowa in the last couple of weeks, both of them, the bills that we helped to get proposed passed out of committee. So they're not into law yet, passed out of committee unanimously. So that's bipartisan.
wonderful.
And they'll go on to like the next stages in their development. So people think that, laws can't change, or they feel like, I don't even know where to begin. And we want to make the democratic process accessible so people can reach out to us and we'll help you navigate that. We'll help you get it going. Because the one thing, he has found is that many of these legislators, one, they don't know it's a problem. And when they find out and they hear the stories, your stories about how you've been impacted, they're moved to do something about it. But it requires, their constituents, people in that state who are saying, hey, this is a problem and we need to do something about it. And so it is actually refreshing. And I know you can't say that often about politics, that nobody is pro mold. That's something Brandon always says, right? Like no one's
Right.
like, I think this is a good thing. It's a matter of figuring out, how do we navigate this? How do we begin to lay the framework for some laws, knowing that there will be additional laws that need to come into place to solve this further? But we're doing, everything to lay a foundation and kind of set the dominoes for hopefully other states to follow.
Yeah, and I just wanted to emphasize this point that just because something is done doesn't necessarily mean that it's done safely or it's even
Yeah.
a legal thing to do. And if only 5 states in this country have any licensure whatsoever for mold remediation, that means that, obviously, most of us don't have that. Even within that, it's not even how many states actually have laws in place specifically for the health of the home occupants as it relates to mold. I
Well,
mean,
and it's none really,
yeah,
because we don't regulate in this country. They're sometimes called permissible exposure limits, or excuse me, I have the hiccups, ambient air. So there is nothing that will say, if you do an air test or a dust test, that says, well, 12 spores of this mold is safe, but 13 is not. So we don't regulate that. We regulate outdoor air in certain instances to a certain extent, but not indoor air. Someone just popped up in the chat. If you go to changetheairfoundation.org and you click on our policy tab, you're going to see we have this really cool new interactive map, and you can click on, I think it was Aaron who asked, Illinois or any state. This is true for any state. And it'll bring up the most current law that we have proposed. The states are in yellow, but there's also a couple cool links there, because you can look up who your representatives are at the state and federal level. We've already done the work. You don't even have to search for it in your state. We've already put it all together for you. And then the last link, and this is on every state too, you can look up the current indoor air quality laws that are in place or not in place in your state, I should say, because in more cases than not. But that's a great way if, wherever you live, check out that interactive map on the policy page and you can see what's going on in your state.
So I think that, and I mentioned this to you and to Michael and everybody when I was just being interviewed for coming on board, that I've been in this industry for 30 plus years, and I've been on the board of the Green Building Associations and architectural associations and so forth. I have never found a nonprofit to be as motivated to essentially get things done the way Change the Air is. Most of the nonprofits I've been involved with, they exist just to kind of exist. And while they might get a few things done here and there to essentially justify their existence with their donors, it's like uh, Change the Air invests about 110% of what they raise into what you're doing. And I know that because I mean everybody involved is personally invested in this, not only monetarily but time wise. I mean, you must have an unbelievable amount of energy compared to the most people because I think you're working about 26 hours a day, Kendra.
Oh, thank you. No, I think when, I'm deeply passionate about it. I care about it. I feel like this is cheesy. This is like my calling. And I struggle and to get personal for a moment, like I have a lot of guilt about what happened and I can't change what happened to my family. And so how do I deal with that? I do whatever I can to make sure that other families don't go through what we went through, or if you do that, you don't make the same mistakes that we did, that you're protecting your health and your checkbook and your relationships more. And it is my way of, making sure that what happened to us, doesn't happen to other people. But I appreciate the kind words because we hit year 2 and the more people we connect with, like yourself and others, this is a an organization that I really feel is poised to do good things, and we have an amazingly supportive community. If people I encourage you, if nothing else, head on over to changetheairfoundation.org and sign up for the newsletter. You get like a weekly newsletter. It's super fast to read. You can read it in 60 seconds. And it's each week, it's like a tidbit, actionable things that you as a homeowner or renter can do. Occasionally there's updates on, the policy work. And it's a great way to just start to connect with us and, maybe take steps to improve the air in your home. And if you're motivated to get involved and do more, or you feel moved to donate, that is something. Sorry, I don't mean to go here. I promise it's not a plug. You can do so, but just the newsletter is a great way to connect and stay up to date on some of these things.
Without a doubt. And at changetheairfoundation.org, you'll also find links to the podcast, the videos, just an amazing amount of information that's out there. Great podcast, and I really enjoy listening to those episodes.
Oh, thank you.
And I will go there, and so you don't have to, Kendra, because I do feel that if this is something that anybody listening has also a passion to help, and I don't care if it's of a $25 donation, I think that to be involved in an organization like this at there's so much that you have done so far for such a young foundation. I can't imagine what it's going to be like in 5 years.
It's exciting to think about, isn't it? And like the more people that we have, like whether it's the policy volunteers, people like yourself, like it is exciting. And there's so many of us out there. And like together, I say this all the time, like we are shining a light on this hidden epidemic. And we feel that, post-COVID world, people are thinking about indoor air quality a little bit more than maybe they otherwise would have, that now is the time. And we can't wait any longer, right? People are getting sick. You can look into the connection between like Alzheimer's and inhalational Alzheimer's and mold and poor indoor air quality. I mean, there's just so many connections to our health that if you're not feeling well, I think indoor air quality. And if I have a minute, I want to point something out to people. We told an amazing story about a little girl named Aria. And Aria woke up one morning and there was a clump of hair on her pillow. And it began what turned out to be a years-long journey with alopecia. So all of the hair on her body fell out. And she went through these painful treatments. And, her parents were told, well, this just happens. We don't always know. And her dad, Jamie, who kept searching for answers. He knew in his gut that something wasn't right and ended up stumbling upon mold and this connection between mold and alopecia, and looked into his home. And you can watch the video. It is 4.5 minutes. And I challenge anyone to watch that video and not be convinced that indoor air quality is a problem, because within 48 hours of remediating the bedroom window that made her sick, she had a first pop of hair in years. And you'll see like all of the hair has grown back and everything else. And so much of what we experience with indoor air quality, it's hard to see the anxiety and the depression and, I don't have energy and I have hormone issues, but this is a very striking visual representation of how the air in our homes can make us sick. So, watch the video, share. We're on Facebook and Instagram. First and foremost, we're here for you to empower you so that you can feel confident when talking with professionals and making decisions for your family.
Awesome. Kendra, thank you so much for coming today and sharing such a difficult personal story, but it's so amazing for others to hear this, and everybody is going to learn from this and hopefully improve their own homes and their own lives based upon this information. So I really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and for everyone for listening. I'm sorry I rambled on there, and Andy for being part of the board. I know we're going to be bringing a lot of your expertise to the material that we're going to be having coming out soon. And, I think it's going to be a great resource for a lot of people. So thank you for being.
Oh, of course. It's my pleasure. And folks, once again, it's changetheairfoundation.org. Please visit, please sign up for their newsletter. Great information coming out every week. So you don't want to miss it. All right. Take care, everybody. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Bye.